Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, June 25th, 2020. It's not January. I didn't make that mistake today, but I did decide to veer into discussing that mistake once again anyway, just to let you know that I was on top of things. I don't know. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I know Greg is on top of things. He's sent about 300 stories this morning, so we'll be checking in with him in just a bit on what's new in his survey, his tour through the top news items of the day. Let's see what Bill has in mind for us. Why not just veer in a totally different direction? He says Daily Coast Radio is live now. This is true. So far he's batting 1,000. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, has all the words today. That's good. Except for the ones that Greg Dworkin, Dem from Connecticut, says. It's true. I've left some of them with him for safekeeping. That's probably a good idea, as it is important that there be words. This is what radio is largely all about. And if I don't have them, or I lose them along the way, I'm really in trouble. So I always send a backup copy of the Oxford English Dictionary to Greg each morning via PDF. And then he opens it up and finds some random pages and decides to dive in. Let's see. One of the things that I was hoping to do a little research on this morning, and maybe we'll just do that research live on camera, except for the camera part, live on the air. Oh, I gotta get rid of this thing here. While we're listening, Greg sent me yesterday the news. Did I open it up already? Yes, here it is. That, we'll follow up with Greg on some of the latest reports, some of which have resulted in actual election calls from some of the primaries around the country. But so far, I don't think we have anything definitive at this point. Well, I don't know. It's definitive enough in the Elliot Engel primary. In fact, the Daily Coast Elections Morning Digest has it this way in their headline this morning. Bowman declares victory, but with many votes still to count, lots of mail-in balloting this time, Engel does not concede. And, it'll take a while for him to get around to doing that. But Politico has already done it for him. Greg sent me this piece yesterday that says, Engel's looming defeat sets up a fight for the foreign affairs gavel. We did discuss this yesterday. And the fact that if he were defeated, there would need to be a successor in the chair there. I mean, I assume they want to actually run things the way they used to, with the chairperson in charge and everything. Not that it has netted all that much for the system hasn't worked all that well, really, quite honestly. But somebody's supposed to hold the gavel that says when the meeting starts and when it finishes. And subheader here, Representative Brad Sherman is next in line for the chairmanship. I guess he's the second-ranking Democrat on the committee now. But he could face a stiff challenge from Representative Gregory Meeks. Now, you all know by now how to predict who wins these things, and the short answer for it is money. And what that means is you'll want to look at if the contest is between Greg Meeks and Brad Sherman. The quick and dirty estimate is, and it's been dead on most of the time, the quick and dirty estimate, open up opensecrets.org, and I'll do that in 2 tabs here, and we'll figure this out. Maybe we'll even get it done before we hear from Greg. I'm not sure, but let's see. And Gregory Meeks and Brad Sherman, right? Okay, so what we're looking for is leadership PACs associated with the two of them, and how much money has come in and gone out, been distributed to other members who were running for election. And if you want to do a more refined search, you'll want to look for members who actually won and will be present in the next Congress to vote in the in the caucus, in the House Democratic Caucus, on approval of or nomination of the new chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. And so, the easiest way to do it is simply look at the raw totals in terms of dollars that they've raised and dispersed. But right, if you want to get a little bit lower down into things and get a better picture, you'll want to see, all right, who did they give the money to? Where did it end up, and what happened to those people? Let's see, is there anything that immediately jumps out as their related leadership PACs? Do both of them have it? I have, here we go, leadership PAC profile only. Show me that on Gregory Meeks, please. And does he have one? Yes, okay. And does it tell us what the name of the... usually it'll give us the name of his PAC, and that's always an entertaining thing to check on. Let me also open it up here for Brad Sherman. And, maybe what we'll do is while Greg is giving his analysis, I will comb through this stuff and see if I can't figure out what's going on and who the front line, who the top line, or I guess bottom line, analysis tells us are likely to come away with the win on that one. Let's see, Brad, they've changed their format over there at Open Secret. So I can tell you what happened for leadership PAC fundraising during the 2020 cycle, 2019 to 2020. The answer here, let me get the phone here. All right, we'll welcome Greg in. Hey, Greg, how you doing? I don't know if you're listening in on what my...
Yeah, I'm trying to give you a little bit of time.
Yeah,
look up that stuff on the internet and see what's going on here.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm just going to do the top... like I said, I can't decide whether they should call it top line, because up in here, the numbers are on the top line. For accountants, they usually look at the bottom line. Let's see. In this election cycle, Brad Sherman's leadership PAC spending $114,143, and for Greg Meeks, this is going to be very close, $116,664.
So Meeks has a chance.
So yeah, according to what he has spent so far. Now again, the more granular the analysis, the better we find out what's going to happen. It may happen that $10,000 of one or the other of them was spent on Arby's, as what's his name used to do. Thank God, I've actually finally forgotten his name. Yes, Rick Santorum paid for his Starbucks and Arby's and other fast food habits with his leadership PAC funds.
Hey, come on. We're not talking about Mike Pompeo here.
No, right. So it could be that all that money's been going straight to candidates. And then, of course, we'll take a look at how did the candidates that they backed do? Are they around to help out? But raw numbers, slight lead in the 2019-2020 cycle for Meeks. Then, of course, you'll look back at other cycles. How long has Meeks been at this with his leadership PAC? How long has Sherman been at it with his? And do a grand total over the number of years for which their leadership PACs were operative, et cetera, et cetera. So you can get finer and finer with it. But the easy way to do it, usually if you pick one up and you say somebody has spent $100,000 this cycle and somebody else has spent $15,000, it's easy and you don't have to go any further into it. But this one's going to be close. Well,
be close, so we'll see.
Okay.
So let's talk about the big news of the day.
All right.
Two huge stories, one politics and one pandemic. So let's do the politics first.
All right.
Just to say that the pandemic is raging. It's basically breaking out again in levels that we haven't seen since April. And that's having a big effect on what I'm about to tell you, which is that the very closely watched New York Times Siena poll is out this morning for the states. Remember, yesterday it had Biden with a 14-point lead. And the purpose and function of bringing that up, it's only a single poll, but there's been so many other polls that reflect the same thing that this one has convinced the pundits, the media, the election watchers that, it's not a fluke. This is now a movement. It's a bunch of things in the same direction. And this morning, the reason that we look at the states is because the individual states tell us something even more than the national poll itself does. But none of these state results are going to be surprising. When Biden has a 14-point lead nationally, it's not surprising that in Michigan, he's leading by 11 in a state that Trump won by less than 1. In Wisconsin, he's leading by 11 in a state that Trump won by less than 1. In Pennsylvania, he's leading by 10 in a state that Trump won by less than 1. In Florida, he's leading by 6, Biden is, in a state that Trump won by 1. In Arizona, he's leading by 7 in a state that Trump won by 4. And in North Carolina, he's leading by 9 in a Trump state that was 4+ for Trump.
Okay.
Now, as Nate Cohn says on Twitter, there could be arguments about individuality of the states. In other words, North Carolina might be a little bit too blue. Arizona might be a little bit too red. But when you take them all together, it matches that 14-point lead. And there are some individual things within the polls that are awfully important. Let me just read you the write-up here because I think it really helps to put this in perspective. Right. And again, one of the things that you'll notice if you look at the actual numbers of the state, Michigan, for example, that's a really important one. That's 47-36.
Okay.
47 Biden, 36 Trump.
Yes.
All right. 36 is pretty low. But keep in mind as we talk about this, that the reason Biden has an 11-point lead isn't because Biden's, at 63. It's because a lot of Trump people have deserted Trump.
Okay.
All right, which raises the question, well, is it possible then they'll go back to him and then everything normalizes and race tightens, yada, yada, yada. And I'm going to make the argument, no.
All right.
But not because of the numbers. The numbers say, of course, it could happen. Reality says it can't, but we'll get to that. Mr. Trump's once commanding advantage among white voters has nearly vanished, a development that would all but preclude the president's reelection. Mr. Biden now has a 21-point lead among white college graduates, and the president is losing among white voters in the 3 northern battleground states. Again, step back and keep in mind, we'll talk about all of them, but Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Florida, win those, you win the election, the rest is gravy. It's nice to have Arizona and North Carolina. Be nice to have Texas. Be nice to have Ohio and Iowa.
Yeah,
you don't need them.
Yeah, I'll take them, like you said.
Yeah. Actually, if we're going to do states, as somebody pointed out, you should make D.C. the next state. All right. And if you feel like it spoils the symmetry, because like we had 50, and what do you do with 51? Just make the Dakotas 1. Who cares? Nobody will notice.
I wonder how the Dakotans feel about that.
Well, sure closer to home with Virginia that we love, Yeah. What about Virginia and West Virginia? Just make that one state, and we can get rid of the West Virginia problem.
Well, that just makes
not so good. Let's just do the Dakotas, right?
Yeah, right. Because you're in unbalance again, aren't you?
In any case.
Okay.
4 years ago, Mr. Trump's strength in the disproportionately white working-class battleground states allowed him to win the Electoral College while losing the popular vote. The surveys indicate that the president continues to fare better in these relatively white battleground states than he does nationwide. 14 versus 11. Right? With a little more than 4 months to go until the election, there's still time for the president's political standing to recover. This is the obligatory it could happen. Okay. You have to do this. Just as it did on so many occasions 4 years ago, this isn't 2016, people, he maintains a substantial advantage on the economy, which could become an even more central issue in what has already been a volatile election cycle, and many of the undecided voters in these states lean Republican and may end up returning to their party's nominee.
All right.
Okay?
We can believe this.
Right? And this poll has a big but.
Interesting.
But for now,
I had no
the findings confirm that the president, get your mind out of the gutter. But for now, the findings confirm that the president's political standing has deteriorated sharply since October, when Time Siena polls found Mr. Biden ahead by just 2 percentage points across the same 6 states, and the gap is now 9. Since then, the nation has faced a series of crises that would pose a grave political challenge to any president. The poll suggests that battleground state voters believe the president has struggled to meet the moment. Overall, 42% of voters in the battleground states approve of how Mr. Trump is handling his job as president, and 54% disapprove. Now, the thing is, a couple of points here. Yes. Trump is stuck at 41-42 in job approval. That is not enough to win. With that 41-42% job approval overall, if you take all the polls together, he's got a 10-point deficit.
Okay.
So people can say, all right, I approve of him, but I'm not voting for him.
Yes.
And people can say, well, I am voting for him, but not enough people, So that's number one. And number two is that you have to step back and look at the reasons why Trump is trailing. Now, I got a completely different survey, and we'll get back to this very important one. Again, important because it explains things, but also drives narrative. But this one is different. It's from the RNS Religion News Service by a academic I follow named Ryan Burge, who's great at explaining evangelical issues. Surveys suggest protests, not pandemic, have lost Trump white evangelical support.
Huh.
Okay, very interesting finding. Data for Progress has been fielding a weekly tracking poll, and I don't remember if I gave it to you, but let me just throw it at the bottom so you can find it easy.
All right.
There we go. For you following along at home, it will be in the summary that Scott Anderson puts together for David.
Yes.
The last few months have not been good for President Donald Trump. His administration's response to the coronavirus pandemic has been criticized for being too slow. If the election for president were held today, would you vote for, and this is Data for Progress, COVID-19 tracking poll. In April, Trump 40.6, in May 39.6, in June 35.3.
All right.
Biden's gone from 45.8, 45.5, 49.1.
Yes.
Not sure, hasn't changed. It's about 8%. Okay. And then if you look specifically among white Catholics, all right, Trump is 52, 50, and 50.
All right.
Okay, so that hasn't changed at all. So no change from May to June. And then if election for president were held today, who would you vote for among white evangelicals? 68.2 in April, 69.8 in May, 59.1 in June. That's a drop.
Yes.
Okay. So the president, in other words, has his choice of bad news and worse news, and he's not only lost support among the general public, but among his core constituency. But the response to COVID-19, which relied heavily on insisting keeping churches open, didn't seem to move the needle as much as the recent racial unrest. Trump's handling of this situation has become a weight around his neck that could sink his chances of being a two-term president by this reckoning, looking at just those groups and trying to put together the timing. And the reason that that's important is because we know with the pandemic, we're seeing it before our very eyes. And we'll get to some Navigator polling on that. But Trump is doing terribly on handling the pandemic, not just in terms of the public's view of it, but his actual performance. He's doing stupid things like going to indoor rallies with no masks.
Right.
So he's doing he's not going to win people over on how he's doing on the pandemic. And I would argue that Black Lives Matter and protest results are something so ingrained in who Trump is that there's no possible chance that he can recover on that. So if the things that are driving his numbers down in the New York Times Siena poll are pandemic response and response to Black Lives Matter, how is he supposed to get that back? He can't. That's going to be my argument. Who agrees with me? Carly Fiorina, who announced today that she's voting for Joe Biden.
I mean,
I'm just saying, there's going to be a lot of people just like her.
Okay. They just have, I don't have to listen to their reasons. They just have to vote.
No, it doesn't matter. Just vote.
Right. The timing is I mean, unless there's something about white evangelicals that gives them delayed response to everything, I don't know what else to point to. April and May were full O pandemic, and they were fine with that, as I expected they would be.
It's the same argument as, well, why doesn't everybody understand that Trump is destroying the economy? Well, people give him credit for being blindsided by the flu. That would have happened, or the pandemic, coronavirus, rather. Okay. Just like the flu. Yeah. And at the same time, they got some stimulus money from him, so they don't give him total, you're awful. Now, when the stimulus money runs out,
that's next.
That's a different story. So if this is the best he can do, and then that's coming, why would he do better on that? And so for the same reason, people say, okay, well, at least, for the evangelicals, he kept the churches open. So that was good. We like that, plus the judges. So we're okay with that.
Yeah.
But what we're not okay with is basically going total white supremacist Confederate.
That's weird because
you're supposed to do that
I
quietly.
thought. Maybe that's it. It was just too loud, or
It's too loud.
or
Can't do it.
One other alternative. We want you to open the churches, and then he did open the churches, and then they all got sick, and now they're mad.
Well, we'll see.
It could be anything, I guess. God told me to give him a 59 instead of.
Right, but keep these dynamics in the back of your mind as you try to interpret the New York Times Siena poll. So back to that. These 6 states, with their mix of major cities, old industrial hubs, growing suburbs, and even farmland, and a lot of white working-class Catholics I would throw in, together deliver a grim judgment of Mr. Trump on recent issues that have shaken American life. His handling of the pandemic and the protests help explain his erosion across both old and new battlegrounds. And I guess what I'm saying is, for some, it's going to be the pandemic, and for others, it's going to be the protests. But either way, it's not something that he can just change and then all of a sudden I'll do better. Thank you. I'm sorry. And then everybody says, okay, well, I'll vote for you now. That's not how it's going to work.
He does say
not
sorry
with 4 months left.
Okay, well, good. Let's get to it already.
Let's get to it. Despite double-digit unemployment, 55% of voters in these 6 states say the federal government's priority should be to limit the spread of the coronavirus, even if it hurts the economy.
Okay.
So people can say, well, all right, I'm okay with the economy. It's not your issue. It wasn't your fault. But you're not doing enough with the pandemic, and I am going to blame you for that. And if that hurts the economy, well, again, it's not your fault. I'm telling you to go ahead and do that. Well, just 35% say the federal government's priority should be to restart the economy. So people don't necessarily agree with the open the state protest, certainly not in the last 2 days. Even the newly unemployed, who would seem to have the most to gain from a reopened economy, say stopping the coronavirus should be the government's priority.
Yes. Well,
now, you can claim and complain, as I often do,
let's do it,
that people like Fauci ought to have more visibility and Trump ought to be wearing a mask and say, wear the damn mask, the way that Marco Rubio did this morning. But the fact is, they are listened to. A high-profile clash with Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, says the write-up, encapsulates the president's challenge. Mr. Trump sided with protesters who opposed her stay-at-home orders, with guns, I would add. But voters in the state opposed the protests against social distancing restrictions by 57-37.
Yeah.
They opposed the protests against social distancing. They don't like the guys with guns showing up saying open up the state. As of now,
even without.
59% of voters in Michigan disapprove of Mr. Trump's handling of the coronavirus, the highest level of disapproval in any battleground state polled. And nearly 40% of registered voters there, including 11% of Republicans, say he's treated their state worse. Mr. Trump retains the support of 86% of respondents who said they voted for him, down from 92%. Remember, he barely won. Mr. Biden, by contrast, has emerged from a contested primary with a unified Democratic coalition. He wins 93% of the voters who backed Clinton, as well as 92% of self-identified Democrats. Mr. Biden also enjoys a significant advantage among those who voted for neither. He has a 35-point lead among battleground voters who said they backed a minor party or wrote in another. So the ones who hate both are going Biden. Together, these shifts give Mr. Biden a 6-point lead among voters who participated in the 2016 election. And this is by voter file, so it should be pretty accurate. These same voters said they backed Mr. Trump over Mrs. Clinton in 2016 by 2.5 percentage points, slightly better for Mr. Trump than the actual result of the 6 states, offering a level of validity to the survey's findings. Mr. Biden also had a 17-point lead among registered voters who didn't vote in 2016. Now, it's possible Biden will struggle to match the wide lead in the polls at the ballot box. Some of those voters may return to the president, but at the moment, 56% of these voters disapprove of his performance and only 29% approve. And the results suggest Mr. Biden has an open path to a sweeping victory overall, 55% of registered voters in the battleground states said there was at least some chance they would support Mr. Biden in the election, including 12% of Republicans, 11% of voters who backed Mr. Trump in 2016, and remember, he barely won, and 44% of the Republican tilting undecided voters. So he's in very, very good shape. And to drive this point a little bit more,
Why not? Go
Nate
ahead.
Cohen says, at the moment, there are limits to what Trump can hope to extract out of the electorate right now. 55% of registered voters said there was almost no chance they would support him. So in terms of the individual states, Nate Cohen says I wouldn't spend too much time dwelling on each. Taken together, the story is pretty clear. And it is. So between yesterday and today, these are just devastating poll numbers. But wait, there's more.
Oh, good. All right.
And I think we can get all this in before the break. This is Nick Gorovich. More from week 14 of Navigator survey. Just 1/3 of Americans think Trump is getting the current response to the pandemic about right. And I know this might sound hard to believe, Nick says, but one possible reason among many is the public doesn't think Trump is doing enough on the pandemic because he spent the last week holding a rally they overwhelmingly disapprove of and think will turn into a super spreader event.
They might be right about that.
Might be right about that. And when we ask people what are the negative things you've been hearing about Trump recently, what are the two most common words? Coronavirus and rally.
All right.
It's replaced bleach.
Well, finally.
So I'm saying, how is Trump supposed to, quote, turn this around? That only happens if you have a unique event that's finished, like, let's say, impeachment, and then you can try to spin and go forward and make people forget. This is an ongoing thing, and Trump is making it worse by continuing to have these rallies. How is that supposed to turn everything around?
Is that what it was supposed to do? I have no idea how it can possibly happen. So that's interesting. The word cloud has changed. That's a very significant event. And it is a super.
The biggest word is rally.
Okay. Well, the next biggest word, I guess, as I heard, was that now dozens of Secret Service agents taken out of service as well. We'll talk about that after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. I've committed to two different stories that I had to bring back when now that we've returned. And where is the actual article? I'll have to poke around for this. But I understand. First, just before the break, I mentioned that some number of Secret Service agents who were on the job for the Tulsa rally are now taken out of circulation. I don't know for how long, but they are all, I guess, 2 weeks. They're asked to self-quarantine following the rally, although it was not clear from, I just must have seen it in passing on Twitter. So it wasn't clear from what I saw on Twitter whether or not any of them were actually ill or whether it was just a precaution. But it tells you pretty much what you need to know about whether or not it's going to be a super spreader event. That this White House that is in such denial about the pandemic is, maybe it's not instructions coming from the White House, but rather internal instructions from the Secret Service, where presumably they still believe in some science, and they said, all right, all these people have to take some time off. So good job decimating the ranks of the Secret Service protection ranks with a
you got to do
rally.
what you got to do. But the point is that each and every one of these things is a risk. And the New York Times has just a wonderful piece today about how the virus won.
Congratulations.
And they talk about the fact that, you can introduce it early and individual cases of the virus being introduced can die down. But then again, you can have one that explodes. Again, it goes with this chaos theory thing we've been talking about for the past few weeks. You can have the same situation and run it 10 different times, and you won't get the same results each time. One time it catches on and catches fire and everybody gets sick. Maybe you're on a bus. or you're at a restaurant with the air conditioning flowing and pushing it onto other people at the next table, or maybe you're in an office and you're sitting directly across from somebody in an open office situation, and everybody in your little cluster gets it, but the people across the way, plexiglassed off, don't. And then you run it again, and it's the other bus, it's the other restaurant, it's the other side of the office that gets it. So the point is, you can do the wrong thing and get away with it, but if you keep doing the wrong thing, it's not going to keep working for you. And one of those times is going to be a super spreader event. Yep. So if you didn't get sick at Tulsa, and apparently people are, not necessarily from the event yet, it's too soon, but from being in Tulsa where it's a hot spot, then it might happen in Phoenix where it's even hotter. Yeah. Or it might happen not at those two things, but the next one in Wisconsin. Or, that's why you don't have these. That's why the Democrats have canceled their convention and the Republicans are having theirs. And while this is happening and it's catching fire everywhere, the Republicans are doing the usual doofus thing of, oh, you're in the basement, we're brave, we're going to have our convention. And the Democrats are what we call leading on this by example. And so it's not going to work for them. Now, meanwhile, we talked about some of the big important states, Florida obviously being one of them. That's just a stunning number from Florida because Florida is usually 1 or 2 points one way or the other and nothing else. But this is Mark Caputo this morning. Florida Democrats have opened up a 302,000 voter advantage over Republicans in vote by mail enrollment. In 2016, the advantage was 8,800. Meantime, Biden leads Trump in polls of the state, and Democrats are up in voter registration.
Okay. Good indicator.
What Trump is doing is not working. Right. And again, I have to step back and remind you, how can Trump catch up when, in fact, he's still doing dumb things and Jared Kushner's in charge of the campaign?
I don't know. That was the plan.
It's working.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah. Well, it's important that it be working for someone. All right. Well, this is, let's see. Oh, that's nice. Okay. Lots of things flying by that are good distractions. But, right. Yeah, so I mentioned...
Oh, so go ahead.
No, please distract me again. I have no idea where to go.
I'll tell you a nice Joe Biden story. I told you one the other day about the rabbi and him being a mensch.
I repeated that at home.
I'll tell you a different one.
All right.
This is from Amanda Littman. It's a lovely story.
Yeah. Okay. I like this one. I have seen this one, but let's talk.
We didn't do this on the air, did we?
No. I just happened to have seen it go by. So
it's a good one. These stories are going to come out. In New York's primary, I didn't vote for Biden. She said, I believe in voting your heart in primaries, even in long over races. But I want to tell you a story in a long thread about why I'm not just voting against Trump, but actively for Biden. Too long didn't read? It's about grief.
Okay.
In May 2017, I was invited to join a small meeting in D.C. with a handful of other organization leaders to give updates to the vice president on our work. Honestly, I was terrified. I was the youngest one in the room and feeling very out of my league. As an aside, I remember it vividly because this meeting was the same day Comey got fired.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so after my presentation, the VP talked a little about his time as a 28-year-old on the Newcastle County Council and the way it felt to make a real impact in his community. The kind of stuff that makes you feel like you're doing good here. Yes. After the meeting, people were schmoozing, and I was standing in the corner talking with this other person here who I know from Obama World, and he kindly asked me, do you want a picture with the vice president? I said, no, I don't like doing that.
Okay.
And I felt kind of silly, but he said, no. So he calls Biden over. Mr. Vice President, come take a picture with Amanda. So the VP came over, and I tried to play it cool. They have the picture here. Well, my Grammy would be furious if she knew I was at a meeting with you and I didn't get a photo. Grammy, the VP said, perking up as we posed for the photo you can see here. Let's call her. So I took my phone back and did what he asked. I called her, hey, Grammy, sorry for interrupting your bridge game. Somebody wants to talk to you. And I handed the phone to Biden. And he gets on and he says, hi, Grammy, this is Joe Biden. Grammy's a loud phone talker, so I could sort of hear her. She is overwhelmed. He started talking about how I'm doing great work and that she should be proud of me. And by the way, she is. So okay. Grammy went on to tell him how she has 18 grandkids. She's truly proud of all of us. The VP was smiling and cheery, and I could nearly hear her smiling through the phone. And then she went on. She had 4 daughters. Her second eldest, my Aunt Michelle, was in the hospital. She got colon cancer, and she's really very sick. She has 3 kids, and it's been a rough 2 years. Biden's posture changed immediately. He stood still. He stopped smiling. He turned solemn and serious, hanging his head like in prayer. I'm so sorry, Grammy. I'm so sorry. You know, my son Bo died of cancer. As a parent, you should never have to think of that. Of burying a child's a nightmare. I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to help you. He stepped away, speaking personally with her about sitting in a hospital room with a sick child about pain. I could hear her choking up on the phone. The VP took his notebook, wrote something down, and said, I'm giving Amanda my personal home phone number. You need anything, you call me. You need anything. You're in the hospital, in the D.C. area, I will come to the hospital. I will sit with you. Anything you need. So he handed it to me. And it was legit, and asked me not to post it on the internet, which is a request I'll keep. The VP kept talking to Grammy for a little while, maybe 20 minutes in total. Then he handed me my phone back and said, your Grammy's a strong woman. I'm so sorry. Anything I can do, anything. Gave me staff contact information, said goodbye. And less than 5 months later, unfortunately, my Aunt Michelle died of colon cancer. Biden sent my Grammy a beautiful and heartfelt condolence letter. He sent one to my uncle, who he'd never spoken to, and it meant so much to them. She still talks about the call in the letter. She notes how much it meant to her to have her pain seen and heard. He's a genuinely nice man, she says. He just gets it. Her grief and my family's grief mattered to him, and he understood how to relate to it. Our entire country's grieving, Amanda says. Hundreds of thousands of people have literally lost loved ones. Millions more are grieving the futures they planned, and Biden viscerally understands how that grief feels. Part of rebuilding the country after Trump will be politics and policies, but just as big a job will be refining our nation's emotional stability, or what the BP calls our soul. We're all going through trauma. Our next president needs to be the one helping us heal, and he can do that. Thanks for bearing with this long thread. And she got lots of nice responses. And again, the reason I wanted to read yesterday's and today's is because this is something you can't poll. It just is. Okay.
Yeah, well,
and
pull it down,
we talked about this during the primaries when Biden was behind. The one thing that he had going for him, even when he was terribly behind before South Carolina, we talked about this, is he's a decent guy. You can hate his policies. You think he lost the step. He doesn't have his fastball anymore. He's not progressive enough. He's not this. He's not that. But he's a decent person. And that matters for a lot in politics. And as it turns out, it matters even more when you're president. I'm one of those old-fashioned people who still believes that. It's not that, that explains everything or that it explains away everything. But character does matter.
Yeah, well.
And we know that because we just seen what happens when you have this character as president.
Right. You could easily envision Donald Trump doing the same things, of course, right? Calling Grammy and saying, I'll come and sit with you at the hospital.
Grammy. So enough about me. What do you think about me? And then getting off the phone.
Yeah, I don't think it happens. They were barely able to get him to visit Melania in the hospital.
Exactly, right. I hear somebody in your family has cancer. Didn't happen.
Yeah, right.
Fake news.
Yeah, right, sure.
Vote for me. Bye.
His own nieces and nephews, when they had medical problems and their father had died.
I just don't believe it.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, unlikely to get any sort of attention like that on that scale from
or
Donald
better,
Trump about anything.
That's terrible. I'll give you Biden's number.
Right, and he would give you the number, too, because he apparently he loves doing that, handing out the number. But he does it on the internet, which is just what Biden didn't want.
Right.
But he did that to Lindsey Graham.
Anyway, it's a true story as far as we could tell.
Yeah.
You're going to see more of these.
Sure.
You're going to see more of these as people try to convince you that, you shouldn't just vote against Trump. You should also vote for Biden because he deserves it. Now, will it work? Not with everybody. But, a vote's a vote.
Yeah. Well, okay. For the ones that it works with, we'll chalk it up to this is a good story. And he seems to do that with some frequency, and there may be some political calculation behind it, but I mean, lots of people do a lot of things with political calculation, and they don't.
Did you see today's Lincoln Project ad? I mean, they have one every day.
Today's, really? No.
This one is particularly good.
Maybe I did. Who knows? Yes.
It's a Biden compassionate, clear choice one.
Oh.
Okay, and it's powerful because basically they're showing you pictures of the Challenger and Reagan's response to it, Oklahoma bombing. And Clinton's response to it, 9/11, and W with the bullhorn at Ground Zero.
Right.
And then Trump
I don't take any responsibility. No.
Yeah, pretty much.
That one?
And then the last part is Biden coming in and saying, I will not, be a divisive president. I will bring people together. Oh, they also throw in Obama singing Amazing Grace, and then they do Trump. The contrast is just phenomenal.
Yeah, good. Because he sucks, and there should be good content. Did you, is that down at the bottom there? Yeah,
I just added it at the very, very, very bottom.
Thanks to Twitter Machine for bringing us that one. All right, I don't know. I'll look at that, but probably on my own later, as opposed to playing it on the air. I don't know, Lincoln Project or Project Lincoln, or which one are they?
Project Lincoln.
Project Lincoln, because they were named by Yoda. And, all right, well, I don't think they would give me a copyright problem for playing that, although who knows what YouTube would have to say about it. So,
all right, this is Harlan Z. Hill, advisory board member, real Donald Trump, book author, commentary, Fox News, president, whatever.
Right, is that the bow tie guy?
Harlan Z. Hill is one of those super Trumpers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think he pretends he's a Democrat.
Really?
Yeah, if I recall, that's the guy with the bow tie, round-faced kid with a bow tie. And
I don't know.
Claim to fame was that he was a Democratic strategist at one point.
But maybe.
He loved.
He's got a round face, but he's wearing a regular tie. Anyway, Harlan Hill says this morning, Siena is a solid poll. We're losing right now.
That's the guy. Yeah.
That's okay, because we have a lot of time to get back on track. The campaign needs to articulate what our message is, why we are reelecting Trump. Joe Biden is a moron, won't cut it.
Okay.
I'm saying even the Trump people are beginning to understand what they're doing is not working.
Yeah, okay. Good.
Now, everybody understands it except Jared, so therefore Trump doesn't understand it.
Okay. Well, that's possible. I should, let's see. Oh, that's, I'm trying to look up some sort of background on Harlan Hill, but I think that they're all written by him. So I don't know whether he still acknowledges it. But my recollection is that he rose to, I don't know what we would call it, but we'll say maybe prominence, pretending to have been a Democratic strategist.
Yeah, it's one of those Doug Shane types.
Yeah, who came to the realization somewhere.
I'm a Democratic strategist who's working for Fox News. And
right. Yeah.
Really covered a Democrat in 50 years, but listen to me.
Right. Exactly it. And so here he is. I mean, I guess this tells you what you need to know on his own webpage. He starts out, with the about me part. Harlan Hill is a Republican political consultant, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But 3 down. So I guess this is what you need to know about the guy, right? Republican political consultant, blah, blah, blah. A lot of bragging about himself. Second paragraph, he's the managing partner of this, that, and the other thing. Third paragraph, upon the inauguration of President Donald J. Trump in January 2017, Hill was invited to join the advisory board of the Trump-Pence 2020 re-election campaign. Hill was previously a national surrogate for the Trump-Pence 2016 campaign and the founder of Democrats for Trump. Wow. What an interesting situation. So, I mean, it may be that he was once a Democrat and then changed. It does later on say Hill started his political career as a Democratic consultant. But there you go. And a big whoop. He's an idiot, and no one listens to him. But that's the guy. I remember him. That's one name I remember.
Remembered right. Well, again, the whole point is just,
I'm just excited I remembered.
Even they get it.
Yes. Okay.
Even John Thune said yesterday, what we're doing isn't working, and we may have to retool. Oh. And John Thune never says anything like that in public.
They got a lot of tools to choose from.
Yeah.
A whole party full of them.
A whole Senate full. So, there you go.
Okay.
And in the few minutes I have left, we should just mention things are really exploding on the pandemic side. Again, driving home the point that with the political numbers that we're getting, the pandemic is driving a lot of this, and then race relations the rest. And the two are just a toxic combination for Trump because he can't handle either one. And they just they prevent him from controlling the news. The thing that always annoyed us about the White House coverage of Trump is that whatever he said, they would run. He threw a shiny object, they would run after it. The pandemic and the protests together are far more compelling because there's video to go with it.
Yeah.
So it's made for TV. And so they cover that, and they don't cover Trump. Trump tries to change the subject. It's too important. He can't. Then he gets frustrated, and it gets even worse. Then he does really bad things, and then they cover that for a little bit. So whatever coverage Trump gets doesn't work, just like his rally coverage.
Yes.
He thinks that he's going to get great coverage, and everybody's going to say, look at his rating. And in fact, what they're saying is, you idiot, you're doing this in the middle of a pandemic, and we're all paying attention.
Yeah.
Not to what you're saying there, but that you're being there. And you can't just like talk your way out of that. Now, this is AP News talking about what's going on. This is Houston, which is one of the new epicenters along
Go ahead,
Florida.
Houston.
People got complacent, and everybody from Houston warned me, please don't do Houston. We have a problem. Please don't. People got complacent, and it's coming back, and it's biting us, quite frankly. That's how the CEO of the Houston Methodist Hospital described the acute coronavirus resurgence in Texas and the U.S. That unwelcome and alarming reemergence is wiping out 2 months of progress in America with spiraling infections in the South and West.
Yeah.
Hospital administrators and health experts have warned that politicians and a public tired of being cooped up are letting a disaster unfold as the U.S. is back near its late April daily cases peak of 36,400. So we're going to have more cases today. We're worse off than we were when we first went into lockdown because Trump has wasted all of that time. People understand that, and that's why he's losing.
So
he doesn't understand it. He still thinks it is a public relation problem. This is a piece in the Washington Post, which is just astounding, which is entitled, Pence Tries to Assure GOP Senators as Coronavirus Cases Spike.
Okay.
He went to Capitol Hill and basically tried to make the case that there were encouraging signs and we're winning.
Sure, why not? Let's make that case.
I mean, after all, it's among younger people. We covered this yesterday. And not as many people are dying. And all the doctors are saying, wait 6 weeks.
Yes.
Because first you get cases, and then you wind up in the hospital, and then you die. And some of those cases that were out there with younger people are exposing older people, and it takes even longer, but you'll still see the same cycle. We know that cycle. Okay, we're better at it, but you guys aren't wearing masks, so we're not so sure that you're better at it. At least people in New York started wearing masks, and the cases came down. You refuse.
Yeah. Then they stopped.
Right? And then you're seeing stupid people, stupid doctors.
Oh.
Who are Trump doctors are saying, oh, it's not so bad because I'm here in the hospital and I'm seeing somebody with a kidney stone and they just happened to test for coronavirus.
Did you take that kidney stone out?
Well, they think that means, okay, it's not really a problem. What it's telling us is that it's ubiquitous and it's a bigger problem than you think. They're too dumb to see it. These are not usually infectious disease docs that were doing this. These are usually procedure docs, And, as we all know, surgeons and procedure docs tend to be Republican, and they're trying to make a case for it. We did studies of that a few years ago, you may remember.
Yeah.
Infectious disease docs tend to be Democrats. Pediatricians tend to be Democrats. Internists tend to be Democrats. High-paying surgical procedures tend to be Republican, like Rand Paul and, Ben Carson. Right. And so you got docs like that trying to excuse it away by saying, oh, they don't really have it. They just happen to be here with something else. And then they come in with coronavirus as if that doesn't make it infectious.
I wonder about that. Yeah, this is an odd thing. Maybe surgeons just are have a black and white kind of view of things. I'm operating or I'm not. There's either a patient here or there isn't.
Well,
it's never
there's another thing.
Prevalent.
There's 97% disease capacity right now. Very little ICU beds in Houston. Yeah. I'm not sure that they've taken the step of cutting back elective surgery because it makes money.
No. I understand that they haven't, as a matter of fact.
They did in the past,
and then they got
a big financial hit, and then they opened it up again, and they've been very reluctant to close back down in Arizona. I don't know what they're doing in Houston, but that's something they're going to have to do. And you don't have to like it. It's just something you have to do. By closing that down, you free up areas in the ambulatory care unit after surgery, the PACU, and you free up recovery rooms, and you can start using them as ICUs. Sure, we've learned a lot about what to do. You don't throw people on ventilators, but they need care. Some of them need more than one nurse per patient. They get very sick no matter what age. So the whole idea is, well, they're younger people, and besides, they only happen to have coronavirus, as if that doesn't make it infectious, are dumb. I expect politicians to do that. I don't expect doctors to be pushing that.
Yeah. Well, it does happen. Oh, look, Brian Monroe already on the case. Are there dumb doctors out there? Yeah, Ben Carson is a brain surgeon. Enough said. Yeah, he's got the card to prove it, and that doesn't mean I would let him do any work, or that he wouldn't lie to your face about the infectiousness of coronavirus if it.
Meanwhile, Texas Governor Greg Abbott yesterday said in a television interview that given the alarming community spread in the state, Texans should stay home if at all possible. They need to wear masks too. And despite the surging cases nationwide, Congress and the White House appear to be taking little, if any, action to address it. That is to say, the Democrats have. They passed something.
Yeah.
The GOP Senate refuses to take it up. Democrats have called for a national testing strategy, but the Trump administration has resisted. In fact, the Trump administration wants to end support for national testing by the end of this month.
Right. And they're taking steps to do so. All independent of the joke, not joke thing. They're actually taking away the funding. Yes.
Well, it's not a joke because they're taking away the funding. Senate Republicans have no plans to take additional action on another relief package until late July. Some Senate Republicans remain unconvinced that any more economic relief is necessary.
Right.
When this stuff runs out and we fall off that financial cliff, I mean, how stupid are they? They think that everything that we see today is going to be true tomorrow. And we're all telling them, you don't understand. If you start to see increased cases, you're going to start to see increased hospitalizations. If you start to see increased hospitalizations, you're going to see increased ICU cases. If you see increased ICU cases, you're going to see increased deaths. This is inevitable as the sun is coming up. So when you start to see the initial cases, that's when you have to jump and act on it, not 3 months later.
Yeah, well,
it's so infuriating. It's so clear. That's exactly what happened in April.
Yeah, but then you would have to learn that or take note of it or something like that, or write it down somewhere so that you could go back and research it. And
I'm just saying, the public gets it, even if they don't, and they're going to pay a price for it in November. We're going to pay a price in the meantime. It's not a great situation because we can't do anything about it till November because they're too freaking stupid.
Yeah, we all just have to sit here and bury people until he's gone.
They think it is a public relations problem, a messaging problem. And that's the only thing that they're thinking about. That's why you got to get rid of these folks. And that's why, getting back to where we started, Biden has a historically large lead over Trump, but it could disappear, says 538, but it isn't going to because they are who they are.
Yeah. Oh, it could disappear. It could.
It could. It's possible. It's mathematically possible.
One of the things that could happen is everybody disappears.
Yeah. Anyway.
It's one of the theories out there of how this...
I'll tell you a nice happy story before
all right.
Mary W. Jackson from Hidden Figures, the NASA black woman who was helping us get into space.
Yes.
They're renaming its headquarters after her.
Hey.
The agency's first African-American female engineer who helped inspire the story behind Hidden Figures.
Statue? No statue? What do you think?
Headquarters. Try tearing that down.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's a lot bigger job. You need more than a chain to do that. Yeah,
symbols matter. I mean, we need concrete things, and I don't mean concrete like buildings. I mean, we need concrete change here.
Right.
Okay, but symbols do matter, and this is an important one.
Yeah, it's a terrific one. As a matter of fact, another symbol I just saw yesterday: Fairfax County here in Virginia, Fairfax County School Board. Can you believe this? It's 2020. They're voting to finally. They're going to rename Robert E. Lee High School.
That's what John C. Calhoun.
Well, they haven't figured. They haven't figured it out. Fairfax is a fairly progressive place.
Let's call it Nathan Bedford Forest High School.
It's entirely possible. But no, well, one thing, I guess they were looking to keep the, possibly, I don't know. I mean, you can get some paint and change the thing, but they thought it would be clever to keep the L from Lee so that they wouldn't have to change all the uniforms maybe, or the baseball hats.
Okay.
And so they could go with Loving, like the Loving federal case, the Supreme Court case on legalizing interracial marriage. That was a suggestion. That was a Virginia case. But lots of suggestions out there. Also, you could use another letter. There are other letters. And like I said, there is paint in the stores, and you don't have to worry about sticking with the L. But yeah, long time coming, I think, for Robert E. Lee High School, right? I mean, he was from the area, I guess, so... whatever, but apparently not embarrassed by this until just now. A lot of interesting stats about that. And I did see a great observation made about the naming of schools, in particular for Confederate generals and personages having not been a tradition in the United States, just like the old, just like the statues only went up like 50 something, and in some cases almost 100 years after the war. They did so in response to the political climate. Same thing. It wasn't until, curiously, the Brown v. Board of Education decision by the Supreme Court that all of a sudden you started to see schools named for Confederate figures, just like putting up those monuments. And where did you put them? Not in the graveyards, not even necessarily on the battlefields, but in front of the courthouses. It's a signal, like you were saying. The symbolism means something. You put a Confederate soldier memorial in front of the courthouse.
Yeah,
So
they have an
know.
L, so they want to use the L?
Yes.
John Lewis.
John Lewis, yes, but not from Virginia, but it doesn't really matter necessarily.
Does it?
No,
You know?
I don't think so. I think that would be fine. And I don't think that there's any requirement that you be dead before a school's named after you. Is there? Just stamps. I think you got to wait. But, yeah.
How do you Ledbetter? Name it after Leadbelly.
Oh, sure. Really, could be anything.
Anything but what it is.
Suggestions happening here. And Mighty OCD, I guess, has the same issue. Two main public high schools where he grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. Robert E. Lee, not from Alabama, and Jefferson Davis, also, I think, not from Alabama, high schools. So,
Right, there you go.
Yeah, all right, well, that ought to do it.
John Lewis.
Yeah, sure, why not? And if you can think of any others, send them along. Although, why insult John Lewis? I think it's a pretty good suggestion. I don't think he'll take it as an insult if you have an alternative suggestion. No, he's also a very fair guy.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
Anyway, that's it for me.
All right. It seems like a good amount because our break is coming up. So why don't you take a break, say, for the weekend, and then we'll catch up with you on Monday, if you're agreeable.
Yeah, I'll go take Abby for a walk. We'll see what
Okay.
happens.
Excellent. Woof as well. I just wanted to throw that in there and let her know. I said so. Okay. Thanks, Greg. We'll check in with you again on Monday, and we'll see if there's any progress in renaming the Robert E. Lee High School. I think it's going to work out. We'll see where they land and whether it has an L involved or not. And,
I like John Lewis.
Yeah. I'll tell him so, and then maybe he'll agree to the high school deal. What do you think? All right. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll have to keep you up to date on what happens with Robert E. Lee High School. And let's see. Okay, a couple of other things that occurred to me. I should get rid of this Harlan Hill crap. That guy was a real jerk. I don't know. Should I even include that in the roundup? Does anybody care? No, I think I've told you what you need to know about Harlan Hill. And you're just going to have to believe me. And I guess you could look it up yourself. It's not hard to spell his name. Let's see. One other thing I wanted to look up and remind you of, if I am recalling this correctly. Yes. I don't think anybody has any real doubt about them doing the right thing. And I think they have already voted on the Fairfax County Public Schools. The school board has already voted and committed to the idea of changing the name of Robert E. Lee High School. And now that I think about it, I do. Fairfax, that's one. I think there's one was there one in Arlington County also, Robert E. Lee High School? I have a feeling that there's something like, I'll have to look that one up anyway. In case you were wondering where they might turn for renaming it, are the people of the Fairfax County Public Schools Board good enough people to do the right thing here? I don't know about the rest of the school board, but many of you who have been Netroots denizens for many years, I guess, will be pleased to note, and maybe this will ring a bell for you, especially if you're from the Virginia or even the D.C. area. Carl Frisch, a Netroots friend and denizen himself for many, many years, recently successfully ran for and was elected to the Fairfax County Public School Board, and so he'll have a hand in that decision making. And so I would say that I guess if they commit to the L, that the Lewis proposition, the John Lewis proposition, is not out of the question. Certainly wouldn't be dismissed out of hand, certainly not by Carl. But yes, I think if you have any really good suggestions, maybe he might even be amenable to taking your suggestions and carrying it forward with the school board. So, and if you're not following him on Twitter, that's an easy way to catch up with him. Carl Frisch spells it with a K, Carl with a K, and he sometimes went by that moniker. I think Karl, last name, no space or anything. Ready? Frisch. You can follow along, and I guess keep an eye on the process by which they rename Robert E. Lee High School. Now, what was it? I'm trying to think. I'll check that out. Robert Lee High School. I think there's one in Arlington as well. And maybe, yes. Oh, yes, and they did, I think, rename that one. Although there's also, there's one in Springfield, Virginia, which also will need some work. But I think that the school I was thinking of in Arlington County has already done this job, which is interesting too. So they were ahead of the curve on that one. And they were Washington Lee High School, like the University of Washington and Lee University. They need to work on that as well. But Washington Lee High School in Arlington has already changed its name. They also did the L thing, but they went with Washington Liberty High School. And I suppose you could go back to them and say, well, Washington too was a slave owner, and then they could think of a new W, like Washing Your Hands Liberty High School would be maybe a good suggestion for the moment, but I doubt that would get very many votes. But there you are, formerly Washington Lee High School, now Washington Liberty. When did they do that? All right. I guess that's a new thing too. But they were slightly ahead of the curve, which I guess you can still give them credit for. In January 2019, yes, okay. Oh, I thought it was 2020. But January 2019, the Arlington Public Schools Board voted to rename the school to Washington Liberty High School beginning in the 2019-2020 school year. That's what we're in now. So they're finishing up the first year, and I'm sure somewhere Pat Robertson is saying that's what caused coronavirus. You took Lee out of the high school. That was probably it. I guess we could. I'm looking over the Wikipedia entry here. There's one last thing that they could probably do to clean this up a little bit. I guess they must have changed. They apparently have like a sort of a, I don't know, would this qualify as a coat of arms? They have a logo that looks like a coat of arms. It's on a shield and everything. It's got a little banner across the shield. Washington. And, well, for one thing, their mascot team names, is the Generals, which Washington was, and of course Lee was, but Liberty, no general named Liberty, but you can still say it's the Washington Generals. Although, isn't that the name of the basketball team that constantly loses, is professionally contracted to lose every game to the Harlem Globetrotters, the Washington Generals? Anyway, here they are. Their new shield, I guess, looks like a profile of Washington in one quadrant, and then they probably had a Lee profile in the other quadrant. And now is a Liberty Bell, which is as good as anything. But another giveaway. One, the nickname of the team, the Generals, and two, the colors, blue and gray. Kind of a dead giveaway about that. They probably thought, well, maybe we can still hang on to that tradition. And I don't know for sure that anybody really gives a crap about the colors, but it is, I don't know. I mean, you could fault them perhaps by saying it is still kind of a like wink, wink Civil War reference. Obviously blue and gray, like as anyone who has bought a Civil War chess set from the Franklin Mint knows very well. Don't we have still a football game, like is it a high school all-star football game? It's blue and gray bowl or something like that. Maybe they should think about getting rid of that one as well. It was just a good old fun football contest, our Civil War. Maybe we stopped making reference to it that much. Okay. Well, more time than I needed to spend on what was going on in Arlington County, given that the news is really about Fairfax County. They are neighboring counties, though. Not immediately obvious to those from outside the area, but similar demographics. So I think probably the fact that there was a Robert E. Lee High School in Fairfax County, even without the Black Lives Matter resurgence in the wake of George Floyd's death, even without that, probably Fairfax was due for that. And maybe Carl Frisch would have made him do it regardless. But I guess no time like the present. And they still have work to do over in other counties. Apparently, like down in Montgomery, Alabama. Is it still the case, mighty OCD, that the two of them are still named for Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis? Makes, neither of them are local, but those are that's really pretty obvious, not even dog whistle. But okay. I thought that was an interesting point. And maybe I can dig up that tweet about that point and share it with you. All right, let's see. Other fun things to share with you. Greg mentioned the New York Times piece, which is following is continuing the interesting application of multimedia presentations that we have seen in the past from the New York Times, and we very recently have seen from the Washington Post. Did I say Washington Times? New York Times, in case I made that mistake. Obviously, I'm not reading the Washington Times. That's garbage. But the multimedia presentations, like we saw with the clearing of the story behind the clearing of the Lafayette Square Park, and yesterday's entry that I mentioned to you in the Washington Post, the story of how those helicopters came to be used as offensive weapons against protesters. New York Times' multimedia presentation is How the Virus Won, which I'm reluctant to declare the virus the winner here, but it certainly seems like they're leading at this, but they have a comfortable lead, and evangelicals are voting for them. So, I think you can get away with that headline, but you should take a look at it. I'll put that in the roundup as well, by virtue of it having been mentioned by Greg, of course. Another interesting story on the coronavirus front from the Washington Post here. Let's open this one up and at least read over the headline here. Christopher Ingram putting this story together. New research explores how conservative media misinformation may have intensified the severity of the pandemic. Now, I think this is really just a confirmation of what we all believed was the case, but it's nice to have confirmation. 3 studies paint a picture of a media ecosystem that entertains conspiracy theories and discourages audiences from taking steps to protect themselves and others. And you can see it having an effect. As a matter of fact, something that Greg shared with me during the break, he pointed this out, and Brian Monroe has shared the same thing here. A video compilation you may have seen circulating yesterday of public comments during a county government business session in West Palm Beach, Florida, with it's a compilation of what I assume are not all the comments that were offered, but a goodly number of them were like cuckoo bananas statements, including many of you have seen the woman who said that wearing masks was taking God's wonderful, or whatever superlative she used, beautiful breathing system, and throwing it out the door because of adding masks. Take that for what it's worth. But then there were even more virulent denunciations, including the one woman who was certain enough to tell every member of the board that they were all going to be imprisoned for crimes against humanity for recognizing the reality of the virus. And it must be very difficult to have to sit there and listen to all of this. Where does all of it come from? Well, Christopher Ingram tells us that there are 3 studies that suggest that it comes from exactly where you thought it came from. Fox News talking heads getting on the air, entering people's living rooms via television and telling them what they wanted to hear, or at least telling them what Fox wanted them to hear, that the virus was a hoax, was a fake, could be defeated with hydroxychloroquine, whatever it was not bad news for Donald Trump. It was good news, and you should all go out there and breathe on one another for money, or something like that. Coronavirus infections the article begins, have surged in a number of states, setting the United States on a markedly different pandemic trajectory than other wealthy nations, even Sweden. There are many reasons our response to the pandemic, tied to nearly 120,000 U.S. deaths, has faltered. They lag behind the Worldometer's numbers, which I think should surpass 125,000 deaths today. But anyway, there are many reasons our response has faltered, experts say, including the lack of cohesive federal policy, true, missteps on testing and tracing, also true, and also linkable to the lack of cohesive federal policy, and a national culture emphasizing individualism, which is a really nice way of saying things, but also emphasizing impatience and, stupidity, quite honestly. In recent weeks, 3 studies have focused on conservative media's role in fostering confusion about the seriousness of the coronavirus. Taken together, they paint a picture of a media ecosystem that amplifies misinformation, entertains conspiracy theories, and discourages audiences from taking concrete steps to protect themselves and others. The end result, according to one of the studies, is that infection and mortality rates are higher in places where one pundit, who initially downplayed the severity of the pandemic, I love it, they got it down to one guy. I mean, there were several, but this is, I guess, the highest correlation. Fox News' Sean Hannity, where he reaches the largest audiences, the pandemic is at its most serious. We are receiving an incredible number of studies and solid data showing that consuming far-right media and social media content was strongly associated with low concern about the virus at the onset of the pandemic, said Irene Pasquetto, chief editor of the Harvard Kennedy School Misinformation Review, which is a very unfortunate title, quite honestly, but you're supposed to read it as the Harvard Kennedy School's review of other people's misinformation, but, I don't know. They went for the shorthand and it doesn't work. Anyway, they published one of the studies. Allegedly. We don't really know for sure whether they did. Misinformation and conspiracy theories. That's the heading of this next section. In April, Kathleen Hall Jamieson, we know her name, of the Annenberg Public Policy Center and, oh my God, this is a thing, once again, with the academic titles. I think everybody knows who Kathleen Hall Jamieson is, but in case you didn't, she is from the Annenberg Public Policy Center and the Dolores Albarracin. Okay. So, thank God. All right, I screwed this up. I thought this was another one of these ludicrous titles. Like she's from both the Annenberg Public Policy Center and something else named for this other person who I had never heard of, whose name was Dolores Albarracin. But as it turns out, Dolores Albarracin is another academic working with Kathleen Hall Jamieson. She's from the University of Illinois at urbanachampaign.com.org.edu. Still, honestly, I mean, that's it. She's just from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, not the Joe Q. Smith School of Public Policy and long building names at the University of Illinois at urbanachampaign.com.org.edu. All right, I've ruined the story at this point. Kathleen Hall Jamieson, who you know, and Dolores Albarracin, whom you should get to know, have both published a peer-reviewed study, reviewed by lots of peers who you should also get to know, examining how Americans' media diets affected their beliefs about the coronavirus. Administering a nationally representative phone survey with 1,008 respondents, they found that people who got most of their information from mainstream print and broadcast outlets tended to have an accurate assessment of the severity of the pandemic and their risks of infection. Good use of public channels to disseminate good information. But those who relied on conservative sources, such as Fox News and Rush Limbaugh, were more likely to believe in conspiracy theories or unfounded rumors, such as the belief that taking vitamin C could prevent infection. Aha! What do you think of that one? That the Chinese, I wouldn't necessarily call that a conspiracy theory, unless you think I'm under the control of big vitamin. But Well, a lot of people believe that taking lots of vitamin C will help prevent getting colds or flu or what have you by boosting your immune system. I guess that would maybe fall under unfounded rumors, although that one stuck around quite a while. Not really a conspiracy theory. I would have, maybe emphasized the idea of like taking or drinking a fish tank would prevent infection. That was probably more squarely under the umbrella of conspiracy theory or unfounded rumor than vitamin C, but okay. Also included under that umbrella that the Chinese government had created the virus and that the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the good old CDC, was exaggerating the pandemic's threat, quote, to damage the Trump presidency. They must be quoting someone there because it's in quotes. Who? They don't tell you. These findings held even after controlling for viewers' political affiliation, education, gender, and age. Because they all go hand in hand anyway. So the authors pinpoint several examples of misinformation circulating in the conservative media. For example, on March 6th, Fox medical contributor Mark Siegel, never heard of him, stated on Hannity's popular evening program that, quote, the virus should be compared to the flu because at worst case scenario, it could be the flu. Well, that sucked. Similarly, in February, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, who's supposed to be smart and went to Harvard and everything, appeared on Fox's Sunday Morning Futures to suggest, without evidence, that the virus was connected to a research laboratory in Wuhan, China. And it is. They were studying it at this research lab in Wuhan, China. That's the connection. Okay, let's see. Shall we read a little bit more? A working paper posted by the National Bureau of Economic Research in May examined whether these incorrect beliefs affected real-world behavior. The authors used anonymous location data from millions of cell phones, and that, too, highlighted in the multimedia presentation in the New York Times article I mentioned to you, How the Virus Won. These authors used this location data to explore how the popularity of Fox News in a given zip code related to social distancing practices there. By March 15th, they found a 10% increase in Fox News viewership within a zip code reduced its residents' propensity to stay at home in compliance with public health guidelines by about 1.3 percentage points. It's enough to point at anyway. Given total stay-at-home behavior increased by 20 percentage points during the study period, that effect size is pretty large, said Andrei Simonov, I'm not sure how the pronunciation goes. That's this study's lead author. It's comparable to Fox's persuasive effect on voting behavior as identified in a 2017 paper by a different team. The effect that we measure could be driven by the long-term message of Fox News, which is that the mainstream media often report fake news and have a political agenda, Simonov said. This could result in lowering trust in institutions and experts, including health experts in the case of the pandemic. It's plausible, of course, that this difference in behavior could be attributed to other characteristics of Fox viewers, such as their age or political ideology. To control for those factors, the authors used the quasi-random assignment of each news channel's relative position across cable markets as an instrumental variable. You're going to have to talk to a statistician about that one. I'm not sure exactly how that one would really work. I mean, there are controls, but I mean, so many of these things go hand in hand and are highly correlated. Because TV stations with lower channel numbers tend to be watched more by those with more than those with higher numbers. That's an interesting phenomenon, but that one's, I think, demonstrably true, which is why it's the same phenomenon, I think, as the one that leads us to randomize the appearance on a ballot of the various, in some states anyway, of the various candidates, so that there's no bias towards the top of the list or whatever, right? And I think people who are channel surfers still turn on the TV and start from the low number and work their way up when they're scanning, right? I think that's what they're talking about. So because of that, and because those numbers are assigned in a more or less random way across TV markets, the authors were able to measure exposure to Fox News driven not by personal tastes, but by differences in channel lineups. Rather than asking, how does Fox News viewership affect social distancing, the analysis asked, how does viewership of Fox News due to low channel position affect social distancing? Very esoteric. While a big step beyond simple correlation, this type of analysis was nonetheless unable to definitively say that Fox programming caused viewers to be less compliant with social distancing guidelines. And I guess you got to fit that in somewhere. But we all know the truth about that. You're a Fox News viewer habitually. You're not going to have any idea what the hell's going on in the world. And you're likely to make some enormous mistakes as a result. All right. There's some more, plenty more to this article, but I think, like I said, I think the headline pretty much confirms what we needed to know from reading through this. Let's see. Oh, that's an interesting thought too. Yes, all right. We can get back to that one here. I just happen to have the comment here from our friend Albert Titus, A.H. Titus, if you're looking for him on Twitter, retweeting Terry Rupar here, who says the federal government sent coronavirus stimulus payments to almost 1.1 million dead people, totaling nearly $1.4 billion, according to this report in the Washington Post. It's a mistake that could easily be made, particularly when people are dying from the coronavirus left and right. But they may have been dead even before they were sent. Albert just noting here, what's even more astounding is that the number of these dead people whose names were John Barron. So, looting the treasury for Donald Trump. Hey, we may yet find out that that's the case. I don't dismiss it out of hand. All right. Let's see. Oh, yes. Another interesting observation that we ought to throw in there, too, on the coronavirus front. Micah Sifry, just many of you may follow him on Twitter as well, displaying one of the more dismaying curves measuring the progress, I guess, of the coronavirus in marching through the United States with a scythe. This is from, I guess he got it from TPM. It's basically the number of cases, the curve for New York and for the United States minus New York, and demonstrating what we've all seen over the past couple of months, that even as New York cases diminish, the cases elsewhere are on the rise. I think we're now beyond the point where the diminishment in cases in New York is able to mask the national rise. But it shows an interesting picture here, with a normal-ish shaped curve in New York, now tailing off in a number of cases and cases rising everywhere else, but rising and then flattening for a time, but then spiking again, as we've been seeing in the last couple of days. And pointing out, I'm beginning to think that the flatten the curve graphic fooled a lot of people into thinking that it automatically goes down after hitting a peak. And I think that's a good point. I think that, and I want to sort of talk about that alongside what I was mentioning the other day, my pet theory about the daily reality of the pandemic beginning to disappear from television coverage, but television advertising in particular, and giving people the impression that this is over, and that with the governments of the states announcing lifting of restrictions, both the general mood that they're gleaning from watching television and not seeing it constantly be filled with pandemic-specific programming and commercials, and hearing that things were opening, and being shown graphs that said, all right, well, it's not on the way down, but we were told to flatten the curve, and we have flattened it, so that must mean we've done the job we needed to do, and it's time to go out there again. But Micah makes a good point and hints at another one. One, that flattening the curve doesn't mean that the curve automatically is on the way down again, even if it's taking a pause at a flat spot. And two, we were told to flatten the curve, and we did. It flattened. And they didn't say what to do after that. And as it turns out, the thing to do after that is stay home some more anyway, which is exactly what people didn't want to hear, of course. Stay home some more anyway. Flattening the curve is the only thing we could do in the face of the rise in the numbers and the fact that we had taken no serious action early enough to mitigate the spread. The best we could do would be to flatten the curve and give, remember the rest of it, give the hospitals and the medical personnel a fighting chance at being able to treat those who, despite having helped flatten the curve and staying at home, etc., found themselves falling ill anyway. They didn't tell us the rest of it. Flatten the curve, and that's your first task. And then stay home until the curve is all the way back down again. That might have been helpful, but it didn't, I guess, fit on a bumper sticker, so they didn't tell us. So I guess we took the flattening as victory and ran out the door. Seems like a mistake now. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Networks Radio. Hopefully all the breaks have lined up properly. I noticed yesterday that we had, I don't know, maybe it didn't come across this way on the stream, but when I was editing things after the show, I noticed that it looked like I had mistimed somehow the third break, even though it's all very scientifically done. So if you happen to have been listening live yesterday and there was a weird re-entry from the third break, tough crap. I don't know. There's nothing we can do about it. I apologize, I guess. I apologize for nothing. I take no responsibility whatsoever. But I happened to notice that was the case in the audio file. I don't know whether that was necessarily the case or I was confused or drunk or what, but it was pretty early in the day for that. So, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying we discourage it. Several other news stories that I want to share with you in our last segment. This is the time when we begin to realize that 2 hours is not enough to share all the news that we put aside for you. Let's try this one. I think we'll start with this fun thing. I think well put here. Brad Pearson. I don't know how he pronounces his last name. Pearson. Pearson. Person, I've even heard. But I don't know Brad, who goes by Bradford. But anyway, I think he has put things well here. He just happens to have highlighted the story from the Philadelphia Inquirer, which I'll share with you just for fun, but I liked his summation of it. Philadelphia is removing its Columbus statue from Marconi Square, which is also an interesting place to put a Columbus statue, I know. But yeah, those of you who for whom this rings a bell, not necessarily because you're from the Philadelphia area, but because you've seen it in the news, this is where local tough guy white guys were showing up with various makeshift weapons and patrolling, I guess they call it, essentially as vigilantes, guarding the Columbus statue lest anyone come around and try to pull the statue down. It was a good bet that someone might have tried with this, and although this looks like a cement statue as opposed to the bronze type, and I don't know how easily those topple, or maybe they're even easier. Anyway, they didn't want the statue taken down because reasons. Generally speaking, I think the message they were trying to get across was that they were the local Italian Americans and Italian Americans and the other Americans who love them, hanging around trying to make sure that the Columbus statue didn't come down even though, as I understand it, historically, maybe his heritage is somewhat mixed and questionable. Not that that's a bad thing, just that maybe the Italian American community could and should adopt a different hero. I think that's what's being suggested here. Anyway, they were hanging around and menacing people and harassing, and in some cases physically harassing citizen journalists who were interested in covering what was going on here. Look at all these stupid people hanging around in this park with the wrong name, given that the statue is of Columbus. They could have put a Marconi statue in there and didn't. Also good proof that there's plenty of Italian Americans to choose from when it comes to honoring people, as they did with the name of the park. But anyway, so Philadelphia is going to remove this statue. Now, what's interesting is that they're doing so after the multiple violent attacks instigated by the guys protecting the statue, which Brad points out is truly an incredible self-own. And it really is. Let's just take the news view of it. Anna Orso and Samantha Melamed, writing for the Inquirer, if I haven't mangled their names too much. Philadelphia announces plans to remove Columbus statue after repeated violence at Marconi Plaza. It's now like a health hazard to have this statue there, is essentially what has happened as a result of this. Now, it might have been pulled down otherwise, so maybe no loss net there, but it's worth pointing out. Philadelphia city officials on Wednesday announced they intend to remove the statue of Christopher Columbus in Marconi Plaza, which has repeatedly attracted armed groups accused of assaulting protesters and passers-by, just passing by, amid a national reckoning over monuments to controversial figures. Mayor Jim Kenney said in a statement Wednesday, the city will ask the Art Commission on July 22nd to approve the statue's removal in light of ongoing public safety concerns about the presence of armed individuals at Marconi Plaza. The move came less than 24 hours after the most recent incident in which a group of armed white South Philadelphians provoked a brawl with protesters supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. The spokesperson for the mayor said the decision was intended as a first step toward healing, adding, the mayor respects the liberties of people with opposing viewpoints to assemble and exercise their First Amendment rights. She said, the mayor takes reports of assault very seriously, including the physical confrontation Tuesday that resulted in 4 arrests, including a man charged after video showed him hurling racial slurs at a black photographer and punching him in the jaw. District Attorney Larry Krasner on Wednesday criticized the police response, saying it is the role of government to be even-handed in trying to prevent violence on both sides, and not to favor people who perhaps make Frank Rizzo's acolytes feel comfortable. Hint, hint. A reference to the former mayor and police commissioner. The Columbus statue at Marconi Plaza has been boxed up since last week when city officials announced they would open a public dialogue about what to do with the structure. Individuals may testify to the Art Commission, which is appointed by the mayor, at its meeting on July 22nd. Residents can submit their thoughts via an online form that will be open through July 21st. It's not clear when the commission will decide. The announcement comes as the nation grapples with commemorations to controversial figures, including in St. Paul, Minnesota, where earlier this month protesters dismantled a Columbus statue while demonstrating against the death of George Floyd. And then they go on to remind you of how George died. Those defending the statue in South Philly say it celebrates Italian-American heritage. Those against it say it's a painful reminder of atrocities against indigenous people directed by Columbus. Let's at least give voice to the objections since we've given attention to the people defending it. Donna Fan Boyle, who is of Choctaw and Cherokee descent and who led an effort asking the Neshiminy School District to change its mascot, said the Columbus statue represented a total denial of the terrorism that he caused. Shall we look at the linked article about her previous work? And I don't know whether I got the pronunciation right. Neshiminy, it's Neshaminy, Neshiminy. What were they working with? Well, Neshiminy probably strikes you as a native Indian name, and you're right. So what would be the worst possible choice for mascot names? Think Washington Breadsticks football. They use the same thing, as frequently happens in high schools. The high schools often take their cues and even logos from professional teams, and thereby licensing their equipment from them and getting it pre-made and getting it, I think, at a lower price too. So there you go. And the piece is illustrated with a photo of it appears in the photo anyway, the all-white students in this section, including 1, 2, 3, I can tell you it's 5 letters. So 5 young male students who have showed up with the short version of that racist name painted on their chests. And, they were taking great pride in the local football, but that's not really what it's all about. So I guess they were trying to get them to drop that. The headline on this piece, which was updated in November of 2019, says Neshaminy School District can keep the awful breadsticks name that they have, but must educate students to prevent stereotypes, State Commission says. Okay, so I'm sure that will go beautifully and everyone will be super well educated. Anyway, that's what this woman was working on before this. So what does she have to say now? That the Columbus statue represents a total denial of the terrorism that he caused. We've been trying to get this issue taken care of for years, she said, and it's really sad that it had to take George Floyd for all this stuff to come to light. True, but I'm glad that they're using the moment and making the most of it. I don't find it a distraction from the central issue at all. I think it's all tied up in a lot of things. Glad they're doing it. Some others may differ, but I'm okay with it. But they're not looking for my approval on this. But you have it in case you need to come and collect it. Okay, let's see. Another story not related to coronavirus and not related to the protests, but a case we should be watching. Found out yesterday that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in the case in which the Justice Department was seeking a writ of mandamus to force the district court judge, Judge Sullivan, who was hearing the Flynn case. You'll recall what was going on here. The Department of Justice came to Sullivan's court saying they wanted now to drop the charges against Flynn and dismiss the case. And, of course, we all know, and I guess you technically have to say suspect, that the effort was because, the president favors Flynn and thinks it's a political liability for him if Flynn is sentenced as would be appropriate for a traitor of his magnitude and wants the case dropped. And Judge Sullivan, noting that the federal rules on this subject say that the case can be dropped with leave from the court, realized, hey, I'm the court, and what if I don't give you leave to drop the case and say we're going to proceed to sentencing as planned? At which point the Department of Justice said, we'll sue to force you to do it. We're going to file a case seeking a writ of mandamus, which is kind of one of these weird old extraordinary writs that basically asking a higher court to step in, or a court to step in and order a public official to do something that they have otherwise, for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, refused to do. In this case, it's a federal judge, so they need to get someone who outranks him to say, yes, you've got to you've got to obey our writ of mandamus, ordering you to dismiss this case. And the 3-judge panel from the D.C. Circuit did, in fact, rule that way. And apparently the opinion written by, what's her name? Is it Rao? Is that the last name of the of the judge? A Trump appointee and somebody who, again, one of these very strategic appointees that was a reliable right-wing nut with no judicial experience, who nonetheless was just instantly turned into a D.C. appeals court judge. Now, though, the question is, what comes next. You'll recall from listening to the show enough times and about this and other similar cases that when a circuit court of appeals rules, ordinarily the next step is, if you want to appeal that, you take that to the Supreme Court, but instead there's an intermediate step in which you can say, I think that the entire circuit court should rehear the case en banc, the entire cohort of the judges on the court sitting to rehear the case and opine upon it before it heads on to the Supreme Court, if that's what it does. It's a rarity. The D.C. Circuit apparently doesn't love doing it. No courts, I don't think, really have any serious proclivity for rehearing cases en banc, but I'm sure there are some that do it more often than the D.C. Circuit. But on the other hand, it's also known to be the case that the majority of the judges on the D.C. Circuit would likely have disagreed with this ruling. And so the question is, what could Sullivan do in the meantime? Kyle Cheney was tweeting yesterday. I don't know if there's an update on this, but back then, yesterday evening, he was saying, just in, Judge Sullivan will now delay all proceedings in the Flynn case. He could be awaiting an appeal or a move to rehear this decision en banc. So, there was no insistence that the order be immediately entered and be effective immediately, and that the writ of mandamus they were issuing be honored immediately. So Sullivan is saying, well, okay, I can see this coming down the pike, but why don't I ask for a rehearing en banc and see if we can turn this thing around before it even heads up to the Supreme Court. So lots of delaying tactics still available to him, and that's good news, generally speaking, though this does make this thing drag on for some time longer. Let's see. Other things to report also on the coronavirus front. I just thought this was an interesting little tidbit in case you were wondering, hey, whatever happened to Dr. Fauci anyway? He was testifying in front of Congress the other day and being feisty about it, but NBC News taking note of this. The White House has pushed Fauci into a little box on the side. What does that mean? Well, they're talking about an org chart, actually, where they showed, I guess, the chain of command on the questions of coronavirus, and Fauci just sort of exists off on his own without any legitimate channels of influence, apparently. It says here, contrary to Trump's claim, internal documents reveal the doctor has little role in the administration's coronavirus response. That may explain his high approval numbers. Very cheeky. Jonathan Allen writing this piece, not always known for his cheek. Congress may want to hear from Dr. Anthony Fauci, but the head of the National Institute on Allergy and Infectious Diseases has been put in an isolation box, a little purple one, on the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Fauci and other administration experts who testified Tuesday before a House committee are part of the task force's physician advisory group, but no one else who works on the team reports to them, according to an internal task force organizational chart obtained by NBC News. The Washington version of a power scorecard shows 4 leadership boards directly under the White House. The doctors in purple, a unified coordinating group in blue, a domestic manufacturing team in red, and Operation Warp Speed in orange. The doctors group is the only one of the leadership boards that doesn't have teams under its control, rendering it powerless to make key decisions and execute on them. Trump has shown frustration over Fauci being applauded by the public while his own handling of the response gets low marks. Trump said Tuesday that despite much evidence to the contrary, there's no daylight between them. Sure, whatever. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. They have a picture of the org chart here, and it makes it very plain. The blue group here, what was it? The Unified Coordinating Group, has a very large chain of command under it and even has other colors associated with it as well. The red group doesn't have much going on. I think they've got one direct report on this chart. And the orange guys have got some sort of weird amalgam going on here. But the purple group with Fauci in it just sits out there all by itself to the left, and nothing for them to do, I guess, but testify to Congress about how there's nothing for them to do. Just thought that was interesting. Let's see. A couple of other things to share with you. Let's see, a couple of tweets that I'm going to have to open up and reveal in order to see what was going on. Yes. That's an interesting one, too. All right, which direction to go? How about both? Brian Beutler tweeting yesterday a shorter take on what Meredith Shiner was tweeting. Let's see. She's just, she says, a recovering national political reporter. And I guess she's recovering very well with this particular thread. What was she doing? I'll have to go back to her, beginning of her thread. She is tweeting once again. We got to do the chain of ownership here. She's tweeting Steve Daniels here. Steve Daniels, he says, writes about banks, insurers, and utilities for Crane's Business Chicago. Steve's story here about Abbott Labs and what's up with them. You remember they were the ones who developed one of the early rapid results tests with the nasal swab that doesn't go all the way up to your brain. And we all had high hopes about it being able to get people back to work faster, because if you could tell in 5 minutes whether they were positive for coronavirus, that was something you could actually do to test your workforce each day. In other words, more testing was going to help, right? So they got lots of big press out of their claims for their new test, and it hasn't really worked out. But there's a new angle on this one. Abbott Labs has cut loose a lobbyist with close ties to Trump, who became a lightning rod for comments critical of Black Lives Matter in recent days. They had paid him nearly $200,000 in each of 2018 and 2019 for his lobbying help. Now, what's interesting is that they don't, I don't know. I guess Meredith Shiner is saying maybe they could name names, and I don't know whether Chicago's, the Chicago Business article, it must name names, but I guess they didn't do it specifically enough for Meredith Shiner, who says, I feel like conservative lobbyist in the headline buries the lead that it was Matt Schlapp. And that name probably rings a bell for all of us, and not just because we frequently say dropping whole salmons on the floor, but because that's the name of a jerk-ass right-wing lunatic and a guy who basically runs the CPAC conference, and whose equally odious wife, Mercedes Schlapp, works in the White House. And I believe it was those were the two that walked out famously of out of what was her name? The comedians Michelle Wolf, the comedian Michelle Wolf's comedy routine at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, because she had made reference to thank God I'm finally forgetting her name. But the White House press secretary at the time, who's the joke was that she burns all the lies and then uses them to apply as smoky eye makeup, and then this was such a terrible insult, personal something about her looks, and Mercedes Schlapp marched out. You remember the story. Anyway, these are the same people. So Matt Schlapp, here's the real story. Meredith Shiner saying, I feel like just calling him a conservative lobbyist buries the fact that it's Matt Schlapp. Abbott Labs paid Matt Schlapp nearly $400,000 just to have access to Trump's inner circle, because his wife works there. Additionally, the story does not mention that the White House / the president promoted the Abbott Labs COVID test by name repeatedly. That's why we know it, right? Even as it was failing. And now we come to learn it paid 6 figures to the husband of a top White House aide. Yes, and as Brian Beutler helpfully summed it up here, Matt Schlapp was on the take from Abbott Labs while his wife's boss, Donald Trump, promoted their product. So that's why we heard so much about it. That's why we saw a live press conference televised across the country, unboxing of one of the COVID tests that they had produced, and the mention of it by name And here is, he includes some pictures here. Here's Trump displaying the test at a presser like it was a Christmas present that he got when he was 9. He's unboxing it. He's laying it out on the table. And the reality is, 1, the thing didn't work. And 2, they were paying the schlaps jointly, I guess. Anyway, they were paying Matt, and Matt was giving the money to Mercedes, paying him $400,000 to do it. And so a little pillow talk at night with Mercedes. Hey, why don't you get the president to mention Abbott Labs test by name and even unbox one of these products on camera while everybody's watching? That was worth $400,000 to him. They got their money's worth anyway. But as it turns out, he's now been fired from the Abbott Labs portfolio here because he's been a loudmouth right-wing a-hole about Black Lives Matter at a time when people are finding themselves challenged and canceled for having done so. And there goes one of their more, but they got their $400,000. Maybe they're happy about that. I just thought that was kind of an interesting story. Another interesting story, and one which we won't be able to get in depth into, but we really, once again, I think I'm shortchanging this story over and over again. But this one here from Vice News, which has its own problems, from Tess Owen, who I don't think has those problems. The U.S. military has a boogaloo problem. We found out recently that one of the weird things happening at the protests, not only the prevalence of the boogaloo weirdos, but the fact that they could show up at these protests armed and get no guff whatsoever from the police while they were busy tear gassing and pepper spraying and beating others. And we suspected, and I think some other people proved the case, that the reason that's happening is they're pals. A lot of times the cops patrolling these protests are boogaloo people themselves. Well, as it turns out, same problem in the military. Some of the largest private Facebook groups catering to the boogaloo movement have scores of members who identify as active duty military, according to Tess Owen. And the piece here is illustrated with a photo credited to the Department of Justice, interestingly enough, of someone wearing body armor, looks like khaki body armor that's, I guess, we're meant to take as the body armor of an active duty soldier. And they have what I guess is the boogaloo patch here. It's a rendering of an American flag. You've seen the Blue Lives, thin blue line flag where they replace one of the stripes of the American flag with the blue line. This one is replaced with the Hawaiian print that we see on those shirts, a reference to Big Luau, right? And then in the field where the stars normally are is an igloo, another of their pet names for their boogaloo here. The U.S. military appears to have a brewing boogaloo problem. I think it's fully brewed at this point, but active duty military are flocking to online networks frequented by the anti-government movement known for its meme culture and Hawaiian shirt-clad adherents who are often called Boogaloo Boys, B-O-I-S, because online, you see. Boogaloo, of course, code for civil war. Interestingly enough, we explained how that happened at one point, which is the ultimate goal of the movement, and some of its followers trade in memes glorifying violence against federal agents and crack jokes about the impending boog. Recently, they've become regular fixtures at anti-lockdown and Black Lives Matter protests in states that allow open carry of military-style firearms. An analysis of some of the largest private Facebook groups catering to the Boogaloo movement found that scores of members self-identified as active-duty military, could be lying, of course, but maybe not, on their personal profiles. Members spanned an array of branches, and you know what the branches are, honestly, I don't really have to name them for you here, and in a range of positions from infantryman to mechanic to army bus driver to medic to amphibious assault crewman. Some of the most active online Boogaloo communities are on Discord, a platform popular among gamers. We've heard about that one before in some of our Steve Bannon coverage. There, members have been discussing ways to co-opt protests against racism and police brutality and to advance their own agenda. At current and former military have chimed in with their expertise, from the best gas masks to military-grade firearms, according to screenshots provided to Vice News. So you can see where this is going and how troublesome it could possibly get. And, of course, Well, I suppose it could give you a false sense of security in your own stupid idea about engaging in civil war if usually the biggest comeback you see to people sending back to them, well, you want to start a civil war? I don't think your AR-15 is going to stand up against the might of the United States military. And I guess if you believe the story and the claims being made on some of the online forums, you might be thinking, well, wink, wink, guess what? It turns out that those guys are on our side. And I think it's the vast majority of them have never heard of it and think it's a stupid idea. But one or two guys who say, anyway, they might actually be mechanics, they might not be in the military at all, but they say they're amphibious assault crewmen, and you're meant to take that they're Navy SEALs from that, I think. Well, we'll see, I guess, when the time comes, whether that is actually the case. But in the meantime, it's probably something that you ought to investigate, and it's something that the government has suspected for a long time. But last time they said it under the Obama administration, the right wing freaked out and said, no, we can't have any of that. End your investigation and never look back this way again. Anyway, time now to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. See what he's got on tap for you here. Facebook faces growing pressure to counteract right-wing hate speech on its platform, but routinely suspends liberals for purely political speech, claiming they violated rules on harassment and nudity when there is none, which seems pretty obvious. But that's
From
what they're
Daily
doing.
Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
More good stuff here. Detroit police are challenged over flaws and racial bias in its facial recognition technology. Big point to talk over. Twitter banned a pro-Trump meme maker for repeated copyright violations. And a leading Democratic super PAC has joined a lawsuit with a Wisconsin TV station sued by the Trump campaign for running an ad critical of Trump's handling of the pandemic.